Now, in Australia, I understand from your statement that there are 821 congregations, is that right?
That's right.
And there are 68,000 active members.
That's correct.
And if my arithmetic has not let me down, that would give an average congregation size of 83.
I guess on average, but some are much larger, some smaller.
Yes. And congregants, as I understand it, tend to know each other and associate closely with one another. Is that right?
It's true, yes.
And would it be true that amongst the Jehovah's Witness faith in Australia, there's a strong sense of community?
Yes, I think that's very true. We probably refer to one another as brothers and sisters.
Yes, and the congregation members gather to worship with each other twice a week and spend much of their social time in each other's company?
Yes, twice a week are congregation meetings. We probably also meet together again on a different occasion to share in our preaching activity, and maybe at other times too.
And they meet up to 3 times each year with larger groups at gatherings such as assemblies and conventions, where friendships continue to be maintained and strengthened. Would that be right?
It'll be 3 times. We have twice a year we have a one-day, what we call an assembly, circuit assembly, and once in the year we'll have a 3-day convention.
And as a faith, each member is genuinely concerned with the welfare of their fellow brothers and sisters as they refer to each other. That would be right.
That's correct.
And as one article, I think, describes it, would you accept this, that the congregations are essentially a collection of overlapping families?
Overlapping families and individuals, not all. Like I'm the only person in my family, but now I've married my wife. But prior to that, I was the only member of my family who's a Jehovah's Witness.
And so for a Jehovah's Witness, his or her social network is amongst other Jehovah's Witnesses.
So generally that would be the case, yes.
So now I want to put to you a scenario. If you take a victim of sexual abuse in a congregation where her attacker is in the congregation and she reports that to the elders, and they cannot act judicially because there's not sufficient evidence. Take that scenario. Now that can happen, I think we've established
yes.
over the last 10 days. And now take the scenario that she feels silenced and unhappy with the organization's response as a consequence of that. Do you see that?
Yes. Yep.
And she cannot bear to be in the same organization as her abuser and have to see him or face him. And as a consequence, she decides to leave the Jehovah's Witness organization. Do you follow the scenario?
Yes, got it.
Now, to do that, in other words, to leave, she must dissociate from the organization. That's right, isn't it?
No.
Well, if she leaves, otherwise she would in any event be regarded as an apostate.
No. If I could explain to correct your thinking on that, if a person, for whatever reason, wishes to attend a different congregation, they're at liberty to. The person's not bound to be in any particular congregation at any time. If, for personal reasons, they decided they no longer wanted to attend any congregation, to stop associating with Jehovah's Witnesses, they would be viewed as just an inactive witness, and they are free to resume their activity anytime they wish. If a person wants to take the step of actually disassociating themselves, wanting to be known no longer as one of Jehovah's Witnesses and have that known to the congregation, that would be a step they would take, and we would try to assist them if there was some way we could help them remain in the faith. But if they're adamant, then that would be their decision.
Well,
but that's what's disassociation.
Yes, well, let's take the scenario where this woman feels so silenced and unhappy in the organization as a consequence of what I set out. She decides to disassociate. And that then means, as it's put in the manual, making known a firm decision to no longer be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Is that right?
That's right. That's disassociation, yes.
Yes. And as I understand it, the same consequences then flow insofar as how she's treated by the remaining congregants to if she had been disfellowshipped.
So that's because she has made that decision, not because the congregation has. A person who's disfellowshipped is disfellowshipped by the congregation for whatever actions that disqualified them. A person who disassociates himself, they personally decide on that action, knowing that the consequences of disassociation mean that they will be cutting themselves off from the congregation, not the other.
Yes, indeed. But you see in the scenario that I've painted for you, that this person's feeling is so deep that she wishes to disassociate from the congregation. Now, the consequence of that is that those, as it said in the truth, being Jehovah's Witnesses, are not allowed to associate with the disassociated person. That's right.
That's true, but it's because of the person's decision. If they just remained inactive, if they just wanted to not be coming along to the meetings, then they can still have free spiritual association with any of Jehovah's people.
Yes, well, I'm dealing with the scenario, as you well appreciate, where this person, because of the way in which her abuse occurred and allegation was dealt with, she wishes to disassociate.
Okay.
And the consequence of that is that those who remain are not allowed to fraternize or converse with the disassociated person, not so.
I agree, yes.
Mr. O'Brien, what happens in the situation, well, I'll go back a step. Do the elders of a particular congregation accept an obligation to care for the safety of those in that congregation?
Yes, that's why they are shepherds, to care for the flock of God.
And if an allegation is made by a woman that she's been sexually abused, which the elders, or at least the Judicial Committee, or those investigating, accept is true, but there's not a second witness.
Yes.
In that situation, the elders would be continuing to accept the abuser as a member of that congregation, notwithstanding that they knew that he had sexually abused, wouldn't they?
Yes.
How is that reconciled with any obligation they have to care for the safety of those in that congregation?
Well, then, I think it was explained by Mr. Spinks that in that situation the elders would meet with the alleged abuser, even though it can't be proven. They would still have taken the victim's accusations to him or her, and then as a result of that would give very clear direction on what restrictions would apply to their association with children, with others in the congregation, and they would monitor that.
And would others in the congregation know that that person had those restrictions placed on them?
No.
That means that supervision is confined to when the elders or an elder is present and observes the abuser.
That's true, but if it was reported to the elders, if it came to their attention that the person was in violation of the restrictions, well, then the elders would take firmer action. The person could even be disfellowshipped if they disregarded.
That's dependent upon the elder observing or
being reported.
Well, how's it going to be reported if the others don't know to report it?
Well, perhaps, yeah, I can't say. I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't happen, would it?
No.
Do you think that's a proper discharge of the obligation you say they accept to care for the safety of that congregation?
Well, again, it's governed by that scriptural command or requirement that elders are not authorised to go beyond that. let the matter be established at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, so that they can take whatever care they feel is necessary to try to protect the congregation. But beyond that, unless there's a second witness to a similar type of event or the same, then the elders' hands are tied with warning the person. And
I'll take you to tab 120, that's Shepherd the Flock of God, at page 115. It's Ringtail 116. You see in paragraph 5, this chapter 10 is headed Matters Related to Disfellowshipped and Disassociated Ones. And then you'll see in paragraph 5 it says disfellowshipped and disassociated ones are generally expected to make their own arrangements for transportation to and from congregation meetings. However, in some instances, a disfellowshipped or disassociated individual who is making a determined effort to regain a right standing with Jehovah may be in a situation that prevents him from obtaining transportation. It may be that he has no car and that family members or others are not able to help him. Perhaps he cannot afford public transportation or it is not available in his area. It may be that the distance involved, personal safety or severe weather makes it inadvisable to walk. In such cases of desperate need, the elders can determine whether some assistance may be provided. Such assistance would be viewed as similar to public transportation, in that there should be no fraternizing or conversing with the disfellowshipped or disassociated person. So that's the principle, isn't it? No conversing or fraternizing with a disassociated person.
that's correct, yes.
And then in the next paragraph, if members of the congregation are known to have undue association with disfellowshipped or disassociated relatives who are not in the household, elders should counsel and reason with those members of the congregation from the scriptures. So the position is that if a disassociated person is in the same household as a Jehovah's Witness on everyday matters in the household, there can be that association. But if they're not in the same household, the same rules apply as if they were not in the same family.
Yes, so with disfellowshipping and disassociation, if they live in the same household, then it's understood that it's referring then to spiritual association. Obviously, if it's a husband or wife or child or mother or father, of necessity there has to be conversation. But it's the spiritual association that would now be restricted.
But if they're not in the same household, then social association is also restricted.
Yeah, kept to a minimum at least.
Yes. And you see there's then a reference there, review with them information from God's Love Book, pages 207 and 208. I'd like to take you to that. Part of this document is already in the tender bundle, but not this part.
Thank you.
And so we to understand that these pages here, 207 and 208, are the guidance that's being referred to at what we were looking at a moment before. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you'll see halfway down page 207, starting on the right-hand side, it says, the Watchtower of September 15, 1981, page 25, stated, a simple hello.
Sorry, I've just missed where you are. Oh, you're in the paragraph 2.
Yes, halfway down the page.
Yes, okay.
The Watchtower in 1981 stated, a simple hello to someone can be the first step that develops into a conversation and maybe even a friendship. Would we want to take that first step with a disfellowshipped person? Now, we to understand that is applying also to a disassociated person, aren't we?
Yes.
Is strict avoidance really necessary? The question's asked. Yes, for several reasons. First, it is a matter of loyalty to God and His Word. We obey Jehovah not only when it is convenient, but also when doing so presents real challenges. Love for God moves us to obey all of his commandments, and so on. And at the foot of the next page, 208, starting the second line from the bottom, you'll see it says, loyal Christian family members do not look for excuses to have dealings with a disfellowshipped relative. Now that applies also to a disassociated relative, not living at home.
Yes.
Rather, loyalty to Jehovah and his organization moves them to uphold the scriptural arrangement of disfellowshipping. Their loyal course has the best interests of the wrongdoer at heart and may help him to benefit from the distance received. And indeed, there are other publications that set out these forms of principle, aren't there?
That's true, yes, that's an understanding I have.
Yes. Now, the consequence in the scenario that I put to you is that this survivor of abuse who wishes to leave the organization is put to a choice, isn't she? She either stays in the organization or she leaves and thereby potentially loses her whole family, or much of it, depending on how many remain witnesses, and her social network.
No, I think there's that other option that you missed there is by just ceasing her activity in the congregation.
Well, I'm presupposing, Mr. O'Brien, that her feeling is sufficiently intense that she wishes to disassociate from the organisation.
Yes, so then she would appreciate the implication of that.
Yes, and her friends and family would face the implication too that they would have to disassociate from her.
Yes.
It's an impossible choice, isn't it? I mean, no one, is it not right, Mr. O'Brien, should be put to the choice of remaining in an organisation which she feels is protective of her abuser and losing her family and social network.
Well, I can only be guided by what the scriptures say on that.
Well, do you accept that it's psychologically devastating and cruel?
The whole purpose of disfellowshipping or disassociation is to help the person see the benefits of associating. So a disassociated person, a disfellowshipped person, is free to come back. A disassociated person particularly, they don't have to go through a lengthy procedure to come back, whereas a disfellowshipped person has to prove their repentance suitably.
Well, it makes your organisation a captive organisation, doesn't it?
I don't follow what you mean by that.
Well, it makes it incredibly hard for someone to leave because of the huge pain, suffering, cruelty that she must face if she does leave.
I don't believe so.
Do you appreciate, Mr. O'Brien, that this point of shunning, as it's called, is the one that probably makes people the most angry around the world amongst the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses?
But if it's disassociation, again, it's a choice they make. They don't have to disassociate themselves to stop associating. They don't lose their spiritual or familial association by being inactive.
I can see you might get some support for it by the manner in which first century Christians organized themselves. But is it justified in today's world and today's morality to treat people in this way?
Well, personally, what is accepted as today's morality in many ways, I wouldn't say is acceptable to a Christian.